In the heart of London, there lived a Nigerian family, Mr. and Mrs. Adedeji, and their teenage daughter, Shola. Despite being settled in the UK for years, the Adedeji family had always celebrated Christmas in a way that felt disconnected from their roots. Each year, they stayed home, quiet, peaceful, and somewhat uneventful. But for Shola, it was always different. Every time she sat down with her friends, especially the African kids at school, she would hear stories of their Christmas holidays in Africa. Stories of grandmothers who made the most delicious jollof rice, villages alive with laughter and music, and relatives who gathered together in homes that were as warm as the sun itself. Her friends spoke of exciting adventures, trips to the village, dancing around bonfires, swimming in rivers, and even seeing the mighty baobab trees that whispered old tales. Shola would listen with wide eyes, her heart swelling with longing. The more she heard about Africa, the more she craved the warmth of the land she had never seen and the family she only knew through stories. But there was one thing that she could not understand: why had her family never taken her to spend Christmas there? One snowy December evening, as Shola sat at the dinner table listening to her friend Ngozi recount the Christmas she spent in their village, a sense of homesickness grew in Shola's chest. "Shola, you won't believe it," Ngozi exclaimed. "We went to the village last Christmas. You should have seen Grandma's jollof rice. It was just perfect. And the village. Oh, it was like a dream. Everyone came home, even the uncles from Lagos. We danced, sang, and even played under the stars." Shola, her eyes glistening, sighed longingly. "Why don't we ever go home for Christmas?" Her mother, hearing the question, gently smiled and replied, "You know, my dear, your father and I have always felt it's best to stay here. It's easier. Besides, the weather in Nigeria can be too hot for us to get used to." But Shola wasn't convinced. The stories were too beautiful. She could feel the pull of the land, the warmth of the village, the people, and the rhythm of their traditions. Her heart ached to experience it for herself. One cold winter's night, as Shola lay in bed, she whispered to the stars outside her window. "All I want for Christmas is Africa," she said, closing her eyes and imagining herself standing in the village surrounded by family, vibrant music, and delicious food. She dreamt of playing with children under the vast African sky, laughing and dancing with the people she had only known through her mother's old stories. As she drifted into sleep, Shola felt a warm breeze wrap around her, and for a brief moment, she thought she heard the distant sound of a drum echoing through the night. The next morning, something unexpected happened. The family's surprise decision. At breakfast, Shola's father, Mr. Adedeji, looked at her with a serious expression. "Shola," he began, "we've been thinking a lot about your request to visit Nigeria for Christmas. I know you've heard the stories from your friends. You're right, it's time we go home." Shola's heart skipped a beat. She blinked, thinking she must have imagined what he said. "Wait, you mean, we're actually going?" she asked, barely believing it. "Yes," her father nodded. "We are going home for Christmas, Shola. To Nigeria." Shola jumped out of her seat, her eyes wide with excitement. "Thank you. Thank you, thank you," she shouted, running to her father and hugging him tightly. She could hardly believe it, her dream was finally coming true. A few weeks later, the Adedeji family was on a plane bound for Nigeria. Shola could barely contain her excitement as the plane soared through the skies. She imagined the village she had heard so much about, the trees, the people, the food, and couldn't wait to experience it all firsthand. When they finally landed in Lagos, the warm air hit them like a wave, and Shola breathed in deeply, feeling the weight of her dream come true. The bustling streets, the smells of fried plantains and suya, the vibrant colors of the market, all of it was like stepping into a storybook. But it wasn't until they reached the village that Shola truly felt she was home. The dirt roads, the tall palm trees swaying in the breeze, and the welcoming smiles of her extended family, her uncles, aunts, cousins, and most importantly, her grandmother. That Christmas Eve, Shola and her family gathered under the stars with dozens of relatives around a large bonfire. Her grandmother, Mama Adoni, stood in front of a massive pot, stirring what smelled like heaven. "Mama, is that the famous jollof rice?" Shola asked eagerly. "Of course, my dear," Mama Adoni chuckled. "No Christmas is complete without it. And you'll soon see why it's so special." As the fire crackled and the air filled with music, Shola's cousins dragged her to the dance circle. She felt like she was in a dream, her feet moving to the rhythm of drums and laughter filling the air. Her heart swelled with joy as she realized that the stories she'd heard for years were now her own memories. Later, they sat together on the ground, eating jollof rice, grilled chicken, and fried plantains. The warmth of the food, the people, and the joy in her heart was unlike anything Shola had ever felt. She felt connected to her roots in a way she never thought possible. As the night went on, they shared stories of the past, of the village's history, and of Christmases long gone. Shola realized that this was more than just a holiday, it was a celebration of family, heritage, and the beauty of Africa. The next few days were filled with even more adventures. Shola swam in a nearby river with her cousins, played soccer in the village square, and even learned how to make jollof rice from her grandmother. But what she cherished the most were the quiet moments with her family, walking through the village, listening to the elders' stories, and just soaking in the joy of being together. On Christmas Day, as they all gathered for a huge feast, Shola looked around at her family, her father, her mother, her grandmother, and the many relatives she had never met before. She smiled to herself, knowing that this Christmas would forever be etched in her heart. When it was finally time to return to the UK, Shola's heart was heavy with the thought of leaving the village. But she knew she would carry the magic of Africa with her forever. On the plane back to London, Shola looked out of the window, a contented smile on her face. "All I want for Christmas is Africa," she whispered softly to herself, knowing that next year, she would share the stories of her unforgettable Christmas in the village with all her friends. The Adedeji family's trip to Nigeria became a tradition. Every Christmas, they returned to the village to celebrate, keeping the connection to their roots alive. And Shola, she became the storyteller, sharing with everyone the beauty of Africa and the true meaning of Christmas, family, love, and tradition.